Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 792. Happy birthday to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Today, we begin year 18 with our interview with Gil Broza. Gill and I discussed his new book, Deliver Better Results, How to Unlock Your Organization's Potential. The book is available now. I'm excited by the ideas in the book, and I think you will also be. If you're involved in improving value delivery, this is a must-have book. Why? Because it identifies what organizations that have successfully improved their value delivery have in common and provide those ideas to you. Gil Broza specializes in helping leaders deliver far better results by upgrading their organization's agile ways of working. He is the author of Deliver Better Results, The Agile Mind-Set, The Human Side of Agile, and Agile for Non-Software Teams. By the way, Gil has given us a special bonus. Listen to the podcast and then download Chapter 1, which is the executive summary of the model that he talks about. Link in the show notes, or if you have a sharp pencil and can write quickly, you can download it from heardonpodcast.deliverbetterresultsbook.com. Are you ready to deliver better results? It's time for the conversation. Gil Broza, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
My pleasure.
You know, it's funny. I remember our first interview, and then I remember actually, I think, running into you at an Agile conference in Toronto, and getting you. Matter of fact, it's one of the books right over here that's signed. Got you to sign the book that I got from you. So Gil, you have a brand new book that's titled Deliver Better Results, How to Unlock Your Organization's Potential.
Yes.
And that's hitting the stands when?
Tuesday, January 23rd.
January 23rd. Congratulations. And that's your fourth book you said earlier?
Fourth.
Yeah, when we were talking. So, let's dive in sort of the central premise of the book. You spent a lot of time exploring why things are successful in terms of delivering value and what they have in common. Yes. What was the driver to get to that?
Well, I have been helping organizations do that for over 20 years now, specifically in the area of agile development. So if you're going to improve the path that my clients have been interested in, and the one that spoke to me the most was, following agile ideas, values, principles, assumptions. Many clients turned out well. Others, it was an effort. Others went there and came back. All around me, people have been trying to help organizations work better, right? All the people I hang with on LinkedIn and in the conferences, that's the business we're in. And then there are all our clients, millions of people in tech, and for me also not in tech, who just want to do better because their delivery is not perfect, and sometimes it's far from that. And they want to improve things, but they're not quite sure what will improve. And there's so much advice out there these days, so much. Some of it self-contradictory, right? We were in the Agile space, and now Agile is taking a beating. Okay, so now what? So rather than say, oh, I have the next big thing, I have the next right model for you, and I'm going to, teach you and certify you and make it a whole body of knowledge and whatnot. I don't think that's the right way to go. Because we definitely don't have a shortage of models. What we do have a shortage of is a reliable way of improving our system, whatever our operational model happens to be.
When you use the term operational model, what do you mean by that?
How the company works to achieve its results. So it might be that you have a project model with project funding and you assemble teams. And the teams maybe work in some handoff linear sequence. Okay, so that could be one operational model. Of course, the company itself has more to its operational model, how cash flow works and how they sign contracts and a whole bunch of things. But we're looking right now at this construct in the company, which is a sizable construct, which is producing some technology, usually software, but not only, that makes a difference to the company's customers, whether directly or indirectly. So we're looking at this construct and we're asking, well, how does that work? So we spoke earlier about Agile. That often lends itself to an operational model in which you have, cross-functional teams that kind of own pieces. Maybe they own more of the outcomes. They work in short cycles and on and on. Okay. So the interesting thing is that across our industry, our huge industry these days, everybody works differently. There is no standard. I don't think there should be a standard necessarily, but I do think that there are certainly good ideas to learn from, and there are definitely patterns, but there are also definitely anti-patterns. And one anti-pattern that we have right now is we don't want Agile. Fire all the coaches, fire all the Scrum Masters. But then what do? There's no answer. So the answer that you do end up having is some sort of mix of what people have done before, what worked well for them in a previous company, something they picked up from a book, from a conference, and of course some Agile ideas, but we no longer call them that. We still have cross-functional teams, we still have backlogs, we still do stand-ups. We're just not going to call it Agile and definitely not going to call it Scrum.
When organizations go down that path and they end up with lots of different ways to do work, how does that actually work efficiently when you're actually trying to get work across a value stream, but everybody's doing something different?
Well, it doesn't work efficiently. We pretend that it's efficient because everybody is busy, right? So we're looking at the inputs.
You mean there's a difference between being busy and being efficient?
Who knew, right? Maximize utilization, right? To 100%. So people are busy. People mean well. We pay them to do professional work. They do their professional work. But as a whole, as a system, you said value stream. I sometimes call it system because it's not quite linear, but it's sometimes the same people, right? As a system, we don't produce things as well as the company needs us to. I'm not looking for industry standards. I'm not looking to copy Google or Facebook. I want the value delivery system that you have in your company to help the company achieve its mission and objectives. That's called fitness for purpose. You want to be more fit for purpose. The same way you do in your personal life. If you want to be, you want to be in good shape and whatever because you're healthier that way, you work on that.
So in the book, Deliver Better Results, you talk about 10 basic sort of patterns or 10 strategies. How did you settle on 10?
Oh, it's a nice round number.
I've heard that line before.
You've heard that line before. I know you have. No, but seriously, what I wanted to provide leaders with is a simple sequence. They can hold it in their heads. They can talk about it. They don't have to remember 50 different things. There does not need to be a big fancy infograph, big fancy picture, huge long bullet point lists. So the way the 10 are structured is that they're sequential and incremental. I don't want you doing all 10 at the same time. So if your fitness for purpose level of your system, not yours personally, is like really at the beginning, it's like a level 1, there's 2 things you need to do, 2 of those strategies. Once you've done each of them enough, the book says how much is enough, how you would know, no metrics. Then you arrive at level 2, and at level 2 you do 2 others, and you do them enough, and then you arrive at level 3, and so on. So the idea was to break the journey into manageable chunks. And what's nice about this is that it is a sequence that really works whether you are project-oriented or product-oriented. If you've chosen, and let's say you've chosen wisely to use Agile, you didn't just copy-paste it, or you're in a total project with deliveries and on time and on budget because that's right for your business, it works for all of these. It doesn't pretend to say the ideal target state looks like X.
Do you think that organizations can have the constancy of purpose to actually tackle all 10? Or do you see them starting and then wandering away at some point?
Well, I see both. I've had the pleasure of working with several clients that definitely had the constancy of purpose. Now, leaders do turn over.
I've heard
Team
that
members
too.
turn over. Yeah, right. And so one of the challenges is to keep this constantly all along. One thing that helps is to give the improvement of the system, to give it a home, to make sure it's somebody's responsibility. And what I suggest is actually give it to a team, not a single individual, such as an executive, because they're too busy and not necessarily specialized in that. So have a team of leaders. They can be middle management or higher, whatever. I've seen all sorts of arrangements. They look after making the system more fit for purpose. It's not a single-handedly achieved type of situation. It is, you rely on advocates, ambassadors, people in the trenches, but you got to keep it alive. If you don't keep it alive, fitness will in fact erode because conditions change, right? This is true of every system. It becomes more complex over time, right? And fitness does erode naturally because you have made things right for a situation, but the situation is now different. Even if all that's different is that 5% of your people have turned over, but it could be 5% that maybe made a lot of the decisions.
As you did the research, synthesized your experiences and your observations, what surprised you?
What surprised me? It's really hard for me to answer this, but I'll tell you one realization I had that might be an answer here. For many years, I have coached and trained and consulted with over 100 organizations, and I know what I'm doing, but I don't impose anything on people. I don't tell them how to work. I never use the expression best practice or any of that sort. I get good results. But what I've noticed is that sometimes what I bring to teams and to leaders doesn't quite stick. A few months later, it does stick. I'll give you an example from a client I had a couple of years ago. So they brought Scrum in about 8 months before I showed up, and it was horrible. I mean, no Scrum person would approve. It was broken. It was bad. Anyway, I came in, I did an assessment. I helped them figure out what could be better, and I trained everybody on agile thinking, agile mindset, agile execution, not necessarily Scrum, although Scrum turned out to be a decent fit for them. Okay, so we worked like this for like 2, 3, 4 months. In all this time, I'm trying to help the teams become more engaged, to contribute more. Everybody showed up to the meetings, right? Like they're supposed to do in Scrum. Nobody spoke. I worked with the leaders on making space, kind of holding the space, giving people room to speak, right? So the leader doesn't stifle the room. All the facilitation work, that didn't make a difference. So a lot of the planning meetings, for instance, were mostly the PO and the team lead talking to each other and everybody else kind of saying, aye. And maybe not even that, it was in chat. But about 5, 6, 7 months in, things changed. And all of a sudden, people are talking a whole lot more. People are contributing a whole lot more. In fact, in some of the teams, they said, our meetings are too short. Because everybody had hated the meetings, so they were short. But now they're saying, but they're too short. So instead of 30 minutes, let's do an hour, but actually talk to each other. So you might wonder, well, what changed?
Yes, I would wonder.
You would wonder, right? Well, one thing that changed is a very concentrated effort on part of management to work on safety and teamwork and collaboration. Not that they hadn't tried before, but when they had tried before, things were in shambles. And when things are in shambles, everybody kind of worries about themselves. They want to kind of make sure that they appear in a good light, they do their work and whatever. Team members may not particularly be hot on collaboration when work is largely apportioned to themselves. There's a ton of work because nobody gatekeeps it, and they just need to be busy. But because in the first 2, 3, 4 months, we had made the effort to stabilize things, that's a level 2 strategy, to stabilize the system so that you kind of know when the inputs, like features, projects, initiatives, would come out and in what shape, okay? Then things become more normal. There is more of a routine. There is more of a familiar situation. You stop worrying about making ends meet. Now you can turn your attention to, again, the safety, teamwork, and collaboration. One thing that's really helped in this context is that the company held an offsite. They flew everybody in. They had several sites. They flew everybody to actually one of the smaller sites. And over 3.5 days, they basically let them decide things. I facilitated a good part of that using open space, which, as you know, gives the participants so much say, even in determining the agenda, right? I mean, that's the big deal in open space. And people came back from this excited that, we have a voice. And if we need to talk to another team, we'll talk to another team. We just met them. Now, it's not that they hadn't known each other before, but, COVID made that difficult and so on, right? So going back to the realization was that when we are wanting to help an organization become really good at developing products and solutions, we can't pile on the goodness. Like everything I was bringing to the team is what I considered good ideas. Again, I don't do best practices, but for their situation, which was definitely not the first time I'd seen something like this, I had a pretty decent idea of what should work. And eventually it did, but not all at the same time at the beginning. And that's like the cardinal sin of most Agile implementations. It's the piling on of all what we think should work. But instead, we need to sequence things. And there's the rub. How do we sequence it? Which sequence would be effective and efficient? And in fact, some Agile transitions, they take years, right? You might have the coach there for years before things become really good. And of course, by then, half management is turned over, and you need to account for that. What I did with these people, they got from a level 1 to a level 4 on this 5-level scale of fitness for purpose within 10 months. Because we didn't waste time doing the things out of sequence. That was the big deal. So it's not like I did anything with them that I'd never done before. Mm-hmm. It's not like there was anything magical, but we didn't waste time on later level strategies that just would not have stuck.
As you go through that, I mean, it sounds like a fairly deterministic process, or at least a flow. Do you truly see it as deterministic? If you do all of these steps, will you be better? Or are there other things that still can create chaos?
Oh, tons of things can create chaos, right? I mean, you can always have somebody come in and say, but in my previous company.
Oh, God. That's high up on my hit parade of if I hear that one more time in my life.
Yes. So look, maybe we need to talk a little bit about what those strategies actually are.
That would be a good idea.
They're high level enough so that you kind of mold them to your context, but they're still practical enough. And one thing that makes them sequential is that there are actually some dependencies, like I was saying before. Things kind of have to be relatively stable before you can start talking about serious teamwork.
So what do you have to do before you hit stability?
Okay. So if you're at level 1, you need to do 2 things. One is you need to manage your project portfolio so that your teams have a chance of, digging themselves from under the pile of work. Okay. So manage it strategically, manage it for capacity. This is not a rocket science strategy, but notice it's a level 1. You don't bolt it on after you've done your Scrum. Okay. It's the other way. Right? Because Scrum or Kanban or whatever, they can only be effective if the workload is manageable. Mm-hmm. Right?
And which in this control, case, right?
Of course, right. So, of course, Scrum and Kanban, they make the workload manageable via, WIP and time boxes and whatnot. But if everybody from the outside pushes in a lot of work and you're expected to turn it out, what are you going to do? Just multiplex those different things,
Absolutely. Right? You just pretend those don't exist.
Exactly. So that's one thing you do. The other thing you do is you organize, you design your way of working. So your structure and your process, overall, your way of working based on what you need to accomplish. So for instance, the client I mentioned, they had several Scrum teams. That was the right thing to do, but they had to realign the teams. because the teams weren't quite staffed correctly for having minimal dependencies and actually delivering finished stuff and whatever. The content team had a good process, which was just basically the brainchild of the team lead. I just helped him kind of sort it out more using a few more Kanban ideas, but otherwise that was it. That was the only change they needed. Okay, at level two, you make sure that every decision has a home, because you don't want to be thrashing around because the wrong person made a decision or the right person made a decision, but they're not quite sure. And the first complaint, they change their mind and things of that nature. So just make sure that when you're at points in the flow of work where you need to make a decision, that it gets made. That's it. Then the other thing you do is you stabilize the system. And this is really where Agile and Kanban, they really shine, because they have tons of good ideas there, right? With the limit whip and the policies, definition of done and ready, reducing unplanned work, all of those things, which you can do perfectly fine, even if you do waterfall. Okay, so you've done that. Now you can focus more on, again, the teamwork and the collaboration. Now you can start deferring commitments, which means don't commit 2 years out to a list of 200 requirements and say, this is exactly what you're going to get and when, right? Because that basically puts you in a straitjacket and doesn't allow you much room to move. And if you do need to change your mind, you are disrupting things. So defer commitments, definitely commit to outcomes, right? Commit to some of the higher level parameters in terms of the value, but commit less, to the extent you can, to the execution parameters, to the solution parameters. And the third thing is to engage teams more meaningfully and more collaboratively and more efficiently in planning. So that's, again, just to give you an example of the whole dependency sequence here. Usually at level 2, let's say teams do Scrum, just picking a Scrum because it's popular, teams will be in planning. And they'll be in reviews and, sometimes in big workshops and discovery sessions and whatnot, but their contribution may not be all that useful because of the way the system works right now. Once the system is stable, people have this better opportunity to actually, share, open up, challenge ideas and all that, and also to collaborate outside of their team. Okay, so you've done that. Gets you to level 4. Level 4 is awesome. Not a lot of companies there, but I know several, and people love working there. They're good employers. They don't have any problem hiring, but even they can improve. So at level 4, they work on greater ownership in the teams. Teams don't just, contribute to planning. They actually own some of the planning. Okay, they pay down some of that tech debt so that the cost of change is manageable. And overall, they just make decision-making better. Decision-making not just at the level of, is it going to be this story or that story, but decision-making in terms of, should we run a promotion on this feature, or should we expand something else entirely? How would we even know? Well, this is where you want to bring more people, have more, voices, not necessarily consensus, but be making your decisions better. There's a ton in the book about how to do that. So if you think back, what I've said here are the 10 strategies. Basically, they are system-wide changes, which I'm not telling you how to do. Again, it can be based on waterfall, Scrum, Kanban, whatever. I'm not telling you how to do them. I'm not telling you which practices to use. All I'm saying is do them in this sequence.
I'm always interested in when there is no... everything is, well, you can determine what is best for your context, and there's little imposition or minimal imposition. Mm-hmm. Are there reasons why there are times when imposing a solution is the right answer?
Look, if the people being imposed on are not in a position to make a viable decision for various reasons, maybe you do need to impose, but assuming that at least you're being informed about this and you're context sensitive and you apply the thing at the scope that matters, right? So for instance, and this is something that, Agile coaches have learned over the last 20 years, again and again and again, You can optimize one team, but sub-optimize the whole.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Right? So should we impose all the agile goodness that we know about on this one team to make them great, or should we work one level up? But then the question is, well, okay, so when we do work one level up, well, there are now more moving parts. What we call the system here is a lot more intricate and elaborate, right? And it involves a whole lot more people, which is, of course, the prime reason it's so complex to begin with. And so maybe imposing is not necessarily the big idea. The sequence of my strategies is important because they're basically prerequisites, right? So, for instance, managing your product portfolio is a prerequisite for everything else, because if your teams are overwhelmed, none of the rest is going to happen. You can try paying down tech debt, but if teams are overwhelmed with new features, they're not going to write tests and refactor code and clean up that code. They're just not. Right? They're not going to spend time collaborating and meeting because there is a deadline with 5 things on it, right? They're not going to even invest much in teamwork because they say, okay, I'll just work heads down. We all work heads down. That's the best we can do, right? But actually, no, it's not the best you can do. It's the best in your current state. But in this alternate reality where you have started to manage your portfolio and the teams are not overburdened as much as before, and the teams are even structured properly, blah, 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 then teamwork actually makes a ton of sense.
Gil, who did you write the book for?
I've written the book for leaders of product development and or solution delivery. I've written it in such a way that CTOs, CIOs, VPs can actually read it. I know they're too busy, and that's why I wrote it in such a way that if they only have 20, 30 minutes, that's enough to get something changing. I call this chapter 1, but it's also written very clearly for the much, much bigger audience that is going to read it, which is directors, managers, program managers, project managers, and so on, both on the building side and both on the planning and designing side. So product engineering, IT. Again, I don't make any assumptions that this is just right for one particular size of company, type of work, structure of company. Not at all. They all have fundamentally the same issue, which is there is a system of value delivery and you need to make it better. We might call it something different. I might have product and engineering and DevOps or whatever I want to call them, whereas someplace else I might call them IT and business partners, but they have the exact same problems. And fitness for purpose is equally important to them. It just manifests slightly differently. That's it.
What drove you to write the book? This is your 4th. What drove you to actually spend the time and effort to do this?
It started with the model of the sequence and also how you would model fitness for purpose and actually calculate it. That's how it started. The point of it was to help really senior leaders kind of understand what they need to do next. So imagine the situation. You have a CTO someplace or a VP engineering or a head of IT, head of technology, head of product. They're not happy with how things are, right? They sometimes, maybe they get read the riot act, or, they constantly have to answer questions like, when will you be done? And why is that not ready? And you know the thing. My assumption is that they want to make things better. My assumption is that, these are super smart people, also super busy. They hear and read about all sorts of things that could make things better. And now it's a total overwhelm of, well, now what do I do? In my situation, what do I do? Right? So do I, for instance, build a continuous delivery pipeline and we release 10 times a day? Is that going to fix things? Okay, maybe yes, maybe no. We'll do OKRs. But hold on, this person said that we're not doing our OKRs right. Which person should I actually even listen to? Because there's a lot of those, right? Or we should do product experiments. Yeah, let's do product experiments. And something I've seen is that a lot of these actually really good ideas tend to die on the vine. And then work just seems to continue kind of the way it did before, business as usual. Now, why do they die on the vine? They die on the vine because it's a system. And so you press one place and there is effects everywhere else. And also because, again, of the prerequisites. And some things the system is just not ready for. And I'm thinking all of these leaders, they mean well. They need well. How can I help them? I've had the privilege of helping over 100 organizations. Not a lot of people can say that. But there is a million of those organizations out there that are not going to hire me. Okay? How can I help them anyway? How can I give them something that kind of tidies things up and says, okay, take a few minutes to figure out, okay, so things are like this, therefore I should do that. It's high level. I can't be more specific than that because, everybody's unique. But to give them something that allows them to know what the next step ought to be.
That's fair. Gil, you wake up tomorrow morning, you have the power to change any two things that affect how organizations deliver value. What would those two things be and why?
Okay, so first, amplify the people first, right? The putting people first. So anybody who will pick up this book and read it will definitely figure out that while I help you with process, people matter to me more, right? And you can see this in all my previous works as well. If you think about how things have turned out in 2023, the industry as a whole was not people first.
Not in 2024 either.
Yeah, but we're still early in it. Things haven't quite laid out well for the individuals. And by individuals, I don't just mean our workers. It's also our managers and our internal stakeholders and our executives and pretty much everybody. And I'm a firm believer that, if it's people who make the product for the sake of other people so that there is revenue and profit for the sake of people, then maybe you should manage your system as people and not just try to standardize the hell out of it or copy paste it from somebody else with a different context and culture. So definitely amplify that. The other is I would love for leaders to have a very intentional and explicit mindset of how they want their organization to run. For instance, one organization I worked with, the decision their leadership made, I just facilitated the conversation, is that we want to collaborate, learn, and improve. That was it. That appeared in job descriptions. That was how they structured things. Collaborate, learn, and improve. That was their from now on, value system, moving forward. That is an intentional and explicit mindset. It took months to kind of really, make real and kind of adopt in practice. But still, it became real and it was in play for years. As part of that, leaders also need to be clear on kind of the model for work. And again, Agile gives us a model. Kanban gives us another model, right? Project management gives us another model. But have a model. Have some idea of some coherent and simple and easily explainable idea of here's how we get work done around here. Because otherwise, what we have is a hodgepodge of ideas. From here, from there, from previous company, from somebody moved from another team, from politics, from a whole bunch of stuff. And then, again, we get busy people, but we don't necessarily get the best results. So just like senior leaders know cold that they need to have a strategy, they need to know where they're going, they need alignment, they need everybody to be clear on the mission and the KPIs and the criteria and this and that, also have the exact same standard of care for the how do we get work done around here? And there, the level that matters is the level of mindset, the choice making, not the practices. Not we do OKRs. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you begin with the end in mind. That's what matters.
Gil, if people wanted to continue the conversation, how would they find out about you? And obviously, how would they find out about the new book, Deliver Better Results, How to Unlock Your Organization's Potential?
Okay. So first off, I actually want to give our listeners chapter 1. Ooh. Anybody who's stuck with us to the end and has heard this and is curious, I mean, of course, I'd love it if you got the book, but not expecting everybody to immediately do that. But I do want to give you chapter 1. Chapter 1 is not an introduction. It is effectively the executive summary of the model. So a lot of what you heard here, including that fitness assessment tool, which literally takes 10 minutes and does not require metrics and consultants. It's not the same as a proper assessment, but it's good enough for the purpose of what's my next step. So that our listeners can get on this URL. I mean, it's a URL, but it's in English. So listen carefully. It is heardonpodcast.deliverbetterresultsbook.com. Other than that, please connect with me on LinkedIn and just tell me where you heard me, which is probably useful to do from a desktop, laptop, not from mobile, because in mobile you still can't put in a message. And my website, 3pvantage.com.
I'll have those connections in the show notes. Gil Broza, thank you again for spending time with the Software Process and Measurement Cast listeners.
Thank you very much.
As I've mentioned, Jeremy Willets and I have a brand new book, Mastering Work Intake. Have you purchased your copy? Link in the show notes, or just get yourself over to J. Ross Publishing or Amazon and buy a copy. Remember, doing the right work at the right time can make or break your project, or perhaps even your career. There are surprisingly few resources that talk about work intake. We solve that problem with this book. In Reread Saturday News, this week, Chapter 6 of Actionable Agile Metrics, Volume 2, Advanced Topics and Predictability. The chapter is titled Detecting Signals from PCBs, Process Behavior Charts. Finding a signal in the noise is like separating the wheat from the chaff. Adding to the pile of quotes, one of the most enduring is, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. A more appropriate version in the context of this chapter might be, give a person some data and they'll see a trend. Teach a person to detect a signal and they won't be as silly. Doesn't have quite the same mouthfeel, but the new version encapsulates Chapter 6. Link in the show notes to this week's installment of Reread Saturday, and a link in the show notes to buy a copy of Actionable Agile so you can read along. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 793, we will explore the relationship between value stream mapping and work intake. The whole value chain needs to understand why mastering work intake delivers more value for everyone. We'll also have a visit from Case Kostecki, who brings her You Are Not Alone column to the podcast. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?